Thank you, Jen, and thanks, everybody. So as you all know, this week, President Biden will head off to Europe on the first foreign trip of his presidency. Certainly not his first foreign trip, but the first one as President of the United States. And the trip, at its core, will advance the fundamental thrust of Joe Biden's foreign policy, to rally the world's democracies to tackle the great challenges of our time. We believe that President Biden goes on this trip from a position of strength. Dramatic progress against the pandemic at home, strong projected growth that will help power the global economic recovery as well, renewed American power and purpose, and a rock-solid foundation of alliances that will serve as force multipliers for our global agenda. At the G7, he will join with his fellow leaders to lay out a plan to end the COVID-19 pandemic with further specific commitments towards that end. He will also join his fellow leaders to announce a new initiative to provide financing for physical, digital, and health infrastructure in the developing world, a high-standard, climate-friendly, transparent, and rules-based alternative to what China is offering. He and the other leaders will endorse a global minimum tax of at least 15%, as you saw coming out of the G7 finance ministers meeting a few days ago. And the G7 leaders will make a number of significant commitments on climate, on labor standards, on anti-corruption, and on ransomware. At NATO, President Biden will address enduring security challenges that have been at the core of the alliance for a long time, including Russia and coordinating the remaining period of the drawdown of forces from Afghanistan. But they will also focus on emerging security challenges to the alliance, critically including cyber and the challenge posed by China. President Biden will also reinforce the importance of burden sharing, not just the 2% commitment that allies made back in 2014 at the Wales Summit, but the need for allies to give not just cash, but contributions to exercises and to operations that NATO is undertaking, and to have the kinds of capabilities that make sure that NATO is a full-spectrum alliance with allies across the board providing the kind of high-end capabilities NATO requires. At the US-EU summit, the President and European Union leaders will focus on aligning our approaches to trade and technology so that democracies, and not anyone else, not China or other autocracies, are writing the rules for trade and technology for the 21st century. President Biden will also have a series of bilateral engagements, including a US-UK summit with Prime Minister Johnson, where the two leaders will reaffirm the special relationship and update and upgrade it for the modern era. And we will have further announcements about additional bilateral engagements that he will have both in Cornwall and in Brussels in the days ahead. After his time at the G7, at NATO, and at the US-EU summit, President Biden will go to Geneva to meet with President Putin. He will do so, of course, after having had nearly a week of intensive consultations with allies and democratic partners from both Europe and the Indo-Pacific. So he will go into this meeting with the wind at his back. Now, we have made clear repeatedly, and I will reinforce again today, that we do not regard a meeting with the Russian president as a reward. We regard it as a vital part of defending America's interests and America's values. Joe Biden is not meeting with Vladimir Putin despite our country's differences. He's meeting with him because of our country's differences. There is simply a lot we have to work through. We believe that President Biden is the most effective direct communicator of American values and priorities, and we believe that hearing directly from President Putin is the most effective way to understand what Russia intends and plans. There is never any substitute for leader-to-leader engagement, particularly for complex relationships. But with Putin, this is exponentially the case. He has a highly personalized style of decision-making, and so it is important for President Biden to be able to sit down with him face-to-face, to be clear about where we are, to understand where he is, to try to manage our differences, and to identify those areas where we can work in America's interests to make progress. When President Biden returns to Washington next week, we believe that we will be in a materially stronger position to manage the major threats and challenges this country faces: COVID, climate, China, cyber, Russia, and shaping the rules of trade and technology for the future. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Yeah.